Hope your work week is off to a good start. This is a daily report for Monday, February 21st. I'm Min San-hee. Korea's total number of COVID-19 infections has hit above 2 million cases in a span of slightly more than 2 years since its first case on January 20th, 2020. We begin now with the broader pandemic update. I have Kwon So-ah standing by. So let's start with the latest here in Korea then.
Sure, Sunny. Let's start with Monday's figure, which is the highest figure we're seeing on a Monday, with over 95,300 infections tallied as of 12 a.m. In the 24 hours. And also that is more than 95,200 domestic transmissions and 144 cases from abroad. Now, as Sunny mentioned, we have now surpassed the 2 million mark in total infections. It took 1 year and 10 months to accumulate 500,000 infections, and then 2 months later, we had 1 million. And after that, in 2 weeks, we went up to 2 million. Meanwhile, the death toll stands at 7,450 as of this Monday. And the average number in the past 7 days, the daily average now stands at above 93,000. And we have a slight drop from the weekend. However, before that, for 3 straight days, we had over 100,000 infections. And today's figure also represents a 1.7 time jump from the week before, and also 2 times 7-fold jump from 2 weeks ago. And meanwhile, there are more than 26,000 new infections in Gyeonggi-do province posted this Monday, more than 20,000 in the capital Seoul. Also, Incheon and Busan are seeing more than 7,000 daily infections. And as for the number of patients currently in severe or critical condition, that has also been going up recently, and for the past 3 days straight, at above 400, and now standing at 480. Now let's move over to the vaccination figures. Only a triple-digit number of new vaccinations were conducted over the weekend when it comes to the first and second shot, and a little over 7,200 people got their additional or booster shot on Sunday, and that's now equivalent to 59.4% of the nation's population. Onto the global figures, a little over 1.2 million new COVID-19 infections were posted in the past 24 hours as of noon Korea time, with a little over 5,000 fatalities. And there have been some milestones again posted over the weekend, as we have the U.S. that has surpassed the 80 million mark in its accumulated caseload. And we've also got Russia surpassing 15 million over the weekend. And Germany has surpassed Turkey's total caseload, while the Netherlands hit 6 million. And those are the general updates I have for now, but I'll see you back in a bit. Sunny?
All right, so thank you for now. Here in Korea, the persistent spread of Omicron is raising questions about the stability of the country's medical arena. And to answer these questions, I have Shin Yeun here in the studio. Yeun, welcome back.
Glad to be here, Sunny.
Right, then let's begin with the state of Korea's medical capacity.
Fortunately, our medical capacity appears to be holding on its own despite the surging number of cases. Though we have seen a slight increase in the number of hospitalizations compared to last week, the country's ICU occupancy rate remains at 33% nationwide. And this is partly due to Omicron being less likely to lead to serious illnesses compared to previous variants. Omicron also has a fatality rate of 0.18%, which is just 1/3 of Delta's 0.7%. It's still twice as fatal compared to the seasonal flu, though. While many Omicron patients aren't reporting severe symptoms, what we are seeing is that they aren't being as effectively monitored or cared for by medical staff. And this comes as the government has moved towards home treatment and telemedicine services since the Omicron wave began.
Right, and Yeun, speaking of remote treatment, how many COVID-19 patients are currently recovering at their respective homes?
Well, just as we saw a doubling of Omicron cases every week, the number of people in home treatment is also rising at a similar rate. As of Sunday, this figure topped 450,000, doubling from a week ago and quadrupled the figure seen 2 weeks back. And given this surge, there are concerns that our healthcare capacity won't be able to keep up. If you recall, in early February, health officials started categorizing COVID-19 patients into 2 groups, One is an intensive management group and the other is a standard management group. Those under intensive management are subject to round-the-clock monitoring and greater care because they're considered high risk. They receive 2 daily health checks from medical staff who are always on standby. They also receive home treatment kits, which include fever medication, thermometers, and self-test equipment. They may also be prescribed Paxlovid, Pfizer's antiviral COVID-19 pill. And those eligible are the immunocompromised, patients 40 and above with underlying conditions, and seniors aged 60 and above. Most patients, however, fall under the standard management group as they're either asymptomatic or have mild symptoms, and this group isn't provided with treatment kits, nor are they actively monitored like those in the intensive management group. It's only if their symptoms worsen that patients in this group can contact their local hospital or clinic to access remote healthcare services. They can visit an outpatient treatment center only if a doctor has cleared them to do so, but reaching health workers on the other line has been quite the headache for patients in this group, with many reporting that the phones were always busy. So there's a clear need for more medical workers who can provide assistance to home treatment patients, especially since more than 1 million patients are expected to be in home recovery by early March. Authorities are trying to address the gap by expanding the number of hospitals and clinics that provide health counseling or remote prescriptions over the phone. As of February 10th, there were only 1,856 clinics providing these services, but this was expanded to more than 6,000 medical centers in a span of just a week.
Right, quite a remarkable achievement, of course. And I understand authorities are also looking to distribute more self-test kits here, as well as antiviral pills.
That's right, Sunny. Korea's Ministry of Food and Drug Safety said they would supply 21 million test kits to pharmacies and convenience stores nationwide. Now, this is substantially more than the 19 million kits made available that week, last week actually, and the total number of kits to be distributed in the 3rd and 4th week of February is 10 million more than what authorities had originally planned. Also from this Monday, health authorities also lowered the age requirement for Paxlovid to include those 40 and up with underlying conditions. Take a listen to what a top government official said about their latest decision.
The government will expand the number of pharmacies prescribing Paxlovid to roughly 800 this week. We will make sure to accelerate the pills distribution.
Right, and that is the latest on the treatment front. Meanwhile, on the vaccination front here, what's the latest with regard to a rollout of Novavax?
Well, people aged 18 and up who haven't been vaccinated can book their Novavax appointments on Monday. Novavax is the first protein subunit vaccine to be manufactured in the country, and this means that it uses a more conventional method to provide immunity similar to hepatitis B and cervical cancer vaccines. So experts say the Novavax vaccine inherently comes with a lower risk of side effects, which is particularly good news for those who haven't gotten their shots or cannot get a second shot because of side effects after the first dose. And Novavax vaccines can be used as boosters as well as mix and match shots. Inoculations will start from March 7th, and once people book a date for their first dose, their second shot appointment will be scheduled automatically for 3 weeks later.
All right, yeah, and as always, thank you very much for the coverage here on the latest that is on the local front. I'll see you soon.
I'll see you soon. Thank you.
Right. Elsewhere, vaccine maker Moderna says that COVID-19 inoculation may become an annual affair. Tell us more.
Right, Sunny. So the chief medical officer of Moderna, Paul Burton, told Yonhap News Agency in an interview that COVID-19 is expected to eventually become an endemic and that we have to live with, and after which protection against it will be needed every year, just like with the seasonal flu. He added that in the near future, that would mean the world needs another booster shot around next winter. So between the end of 2022 and early 2023, backing data showing the efficacy of a booster shot starts to wane around 6 months after receiving it. While Moderna is currently giving half of the amount of its first and second doses for third shots, so 50 micrograms, which reduces the chance of developing severe symptoms as well as death, but to drop the infection rate further. Burton says a better vaccine needs to be developed. Moderna has started its development of an Omicron-tailored vaccine in November, as well as one that should provide protection against both the Omicron and Delta variant. Data results are expected as early as March and early summer, respectively. And that meaning that those new vaccines may be introduced for that second booster shot that the officer mentioned, which is needed next winter, as he says.
Right. And in related news, so relevant officials in the US, I understand, are looking to allow for a second booster dose.
Right, Sunny. According to Wall Street Journal, sources said that the US FDA is considering giving the green light for the fourth COVID-19 vaccine dose from Pfizer and Moderna in fall. While the FDA has not made an official comment yet, the report says it is in its early stages of the plan, with an approval to depend on various factors, including whether second booster shots should be administered for all adults or particular age groups, and whether it should specifically target the Omicron variant. Last month, the agency shortened the interval between the initial 2 jabs and a booster shot to 5 months. Italy, meanwhile, has become the latest country to recommend a fourth mRNA vaccine dose. Its health ministry said on Sunday that those should be made available for people with severely compromised immune systems at least 120 days after their previous booster shot. Now, they do not have a fixed date yet on when actually the second booster shot campaign will start, but it is now following similar moves that we here in Korea have also taken, as we have around some hundreds of people who have already received their second booster shot. And also recently, Denmark and Sweden were countries that have made recommendations for this fourth dose. And as we know, Israel was the first one which started this fourth dose campaign earlier this year.
Right, it was. So meanwhile, over in the UK, the Queen has tested positive for COVID-19.
Right, Sunny. Buckingham Palace confirmed on Sunday local time that Queen Elizabeth tested positive for COVID-19, but reportedly is continuing light royal duties and is further expected to over the coming week. And one of those light duties were seen through a message from the Queen on the royal family's website, on which she congratulated Britain's performance at the Beijing Winter Olympics. The 95-year-old Queen has been fully vaccinated against the virus, and her symptoms appear to be mild. But health experts are carefully monitoring her to make sure she does not develop more severe symptoms. The world's longest reigning monarch, Queen Elizabeth II, recently celebrated her 70th anniversary on the throne.
Right, let's hope for a prompt recovery then. And now on a bright note, Australia has opened its borders.
Yes, for the first time in almost 2 years, Australia welcomed travelers from all around the world, including the US, Canada, Singapore, and Japan, after strict travel restrictions were in place amid the pandemic. So international borders to vaccinated travelers are now open after they were closed in March 2020. Not only for tourists, but also reunited families and friends that were separated during that period. Over 50 international flights were scheduled to arrive on the first day, including 27 in Australia's largest city, Sydney. Here are some of the emotional moments at the airport.
Warmth of the welcome that's been given to those first planes that have come in this morning has been quite extraordinary, and to see the way that people have been reunited, the hugs, the tears, has just been wonderful.
Yeah, as soon as I opened up the borders, I just knew I could finally come and see my family and attend my brother's wedding, like on March 4th.
Been waiting to come for ages, so it's a thrill. I miss my parents.
So as you can see, it must have been a tough time for these families and acquaintances over the past 2 years. But notable is, though, that Australia recently has hit its 3 million mark in total infections, as most of the cases in the country have emerged amid the Omicron variant wave. And this is why there still remain some concerns. Although the travel industry had been hit too much, I believe that is one of the reasons why they have now reopened their borders. borders, and also because more people are vaccinated.
Right, of course. Right, so thank you for the broader international coverage. I'll see you on Tuesday.
See you on Tuesday.
In our headlines at this hour, Russia is reportedly poised to stage an aggravated assault on Ukraine. This is according to sources within the Biden administration. Kim Yo-sun explains.
The U.S. claims Russia has close to 3/4 of its conventional forces postured against Ukraine. Citing the latest intelligence assessment, an unnamed U.S. official told CNN that having such a deployment within striking distance of Ukraine is highly unusual. The official added that this is part of the reason why Washington believes Moscow is ready to attack. CNN says some 120 of Russia's 160 battalion tactical groups are positioned within 60 kilometers of Ukraine. Citing the official, CNN added as many as 190,000 Russian troops combined with separatist forces could have been deployed around Ukraine. Some 35 of Moscow's 50 air defense battalions have also reportedly been deployed. The Biden administration is warning its Western allies there is a high possibility of Russia targeting Kiev, Ukraine's capital, in the coming week. It added other cities in eastern and southern Ukraine could also be targeted. Warning Russia is moving ahead with its invasion plans, America's top diplomats again called for a diplomatic solution. In a televised interview Sunday, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken underscored that the Biden administration remains convinced Moscow is poised to invade Ukraine, citing numerous reasons. However, he also said President Biden remains willing to talk to Russian President Vladimir Putin. Kim Yo-sun, Arirang News.
And concerns over the crisis in Ukraine are pushing up the prices of commodities, including those of gold and oil. Kim Sang-min reports.
The tensions between Russia and Ukraine have pushed gold prices as people seek safe haven assets amid growing uncertainties. Gold is now set for a third straight weekly gain, with the price per ounce hitting the $1,900 mark. That's its highest in 8 months. Analysts forecast that geopolitical tensions could push up the near-term price to around $2,000 an ounce. But further out, it is expected to trend down to below the 1,800 mark once the situation calms down. Global oil prices also surged on Monday as possible sanctions from the international community against Russian oil could cause a further spike in already high energy costs. Following the news that the U.S. and the European Union are warning that Russia will face sanctions if it invades Ukraine, Brent crude futures climbed 1.4% to touch $95 on Monday. U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude futures also surged almost 2%. Considering Russia accounts for 12% of global oil production, what happens there can have a big impact on global oil prices. Other commodities that have high reliance on Russia and Ukraine, like aluminium and corn, are facing price hikes. Russia is the world's second biggest aluminium producer, and Ukraine makes up 13% of global corn exports. Experts say that the standoff on the Ukraine border could aggravate the commodity supply crunch, which has already been worsened by the energy crisis in China last year and by adverse weather around the world. Kim Sang-min, Arirang News.
In other news, curtains went down on the Winter Olympics over in Beijing this past Sunday. Our Ji-young has some of those scenes and more.
A shining snowflake floats into the air and brightens the night sky, and a fireworks display spells out the slogan, "One World, One Family." Extinguishing the Olympic flame, Beijing wrapped up the 17-day-long Olympics, finishing off a Games that goes down in history as the Chinese capital is now the only city in the world to have hosted both a Summer and Winter Olympics. With Chinese President Xi Jinping on hand, the Games closed with a traditional closing ceremony on Sunday at Beijing's Bird's Nest Stadium. Ahead of declaring the end of the Games, International Olympic Committee President Thomas Bach said the Beijing Olympics was truly exceptional.
There will be, first of all, the legacy of a new global winter sport. Winter sport will fundamentally change after these Olympic Winter Games Beijing 2022, with the engagement of more than 300 million Chinese people in winter sports. This is an amazing figure, and it offers a huge potential for the winter sports and for the international winter sports federations.
Some 2,900 athletes from 91 countries competed for 109 gold medals in Beijing. South Korea ranked 14th in the medal tally, winning 2 gold, 5 silver, and 2 bronze medals. Posting on his social media, President Moon Jae-in said he was proud of all of South Korea's athletes, saying they'd done their best at each and every moment. Mentioning some of them by name, he said he appreciated all the athletes, adding that everyone is a winner. As the second Olympics held during the COVID-19 pandemic, the Beijing Olympics had the strictest restrictions in place with what Chinese authorities called a closed-loop system. It was also overshadowed by outrage over a doping scandal and the U.S.-led diplomatic boycott over China's human rights issues. The Italian cities of Milan and Cortina d'Ampezzo will host the next Winter Olympics in 2026. 엄지영, Arirang News.
Across the border in North Korea, the regime appears to have refrained from its shows of military might in light of the Beijing Winter Olympics. But now that the Games are over, observers believe Pyongyang may put on quite a display, especially in April. Here's our North Korea correspondent, Kim Dami.
As the 2022 Winter Olympics came to a close, attention shifted to North Korea and the possibility it may resume military activities. The regime, a close ally of Beijing, held back on further missile tests for the past few weeks after 7 launches just last month, including its intermediate-range ballistic missile, the Hwasong-12. Instead, the leader Kim Jong-un has appeared to have focused on solidifying internal unity by attending the groundbreaking ceremony for housing project, as well as celebrations for the 80th birthday of the late leader Kim Jong-il last week, which ended with various events and performances instead of a military parade or another missile launch. Watchers are voicing concerns over Pyongyang's possible resumption of military activities and also warning that it has become more difficult to predict when they might occur.
It's hard to draw the US's attention with provocations and get a message from them because Washington is focusing on the Ukraine crisis, meaning it's a very flexible situation at the moment.
But if the North does decide to carry out military acts, experts point to April when big anniversaries fall in the year 2022, a quote, revolutionary year for the regime.
North Korea may do something to highlight April 15th, the 110th birthday of the founding leader Kim Il-sung. And April also marks the 90th anniversary of the North Korean People's Army.
But the expert further noted the North will remain cautious on terminating its self-imposed moratorium on testing nuclear weapons, as that will be its one and only card for putting pressure on the Biden administration. And Seoul's Unification Ministry has once again called on the North to choose a dialogue and cooperation for a peace on the Korean Peninsula.
The Unification Ministry has urged the North to suspend activities that threaten peace and cause instability in the region and maintain the moratorium it promised to the international community.
The spokesperson further added that Seoul will continue to closely monitor the North's related moves and prepare for all possibilities. Kim Dami, Arirang News.
Korea is launching diplomatic efforts to offset Japan's plans to add a controversial mine onto UNESCO's list of World Heritage Sites. Our Yoon Jung-min has details.
South Korea is upping its diplomatic efforts this week regarding Japan's UNESCO push for its Sado mines, which used wartime forced labor. Foreign Minister Chung Eui-yong is heading for Paris on Monday for a meeting with ministers from the Indo-Pacific region, as well as with UNESCO Director General Audrey Azoulay. Chong is likely to discuss the issue when he meets the UNESCO chief. Tokyo is pushing to get the mines on the Japanese island of Sado listed as UNESCO World Heritage, despite Koreans having been subjected to forced labor there by Japan during World War II. Japan's application reportedly only includes the period from the 16th to mid-19th century and excludes the period of the Japanese occupation of Korea and the wartime period going up to the 1940s. An ICAMAS Korea board member says bringing the issue on the global stage is important because coordination is critical for UNESCO heritage.
What Japan is pushing right now is, in fact, unreasonable. As for documentary heritage, Japan itself has created and applied a principle that there should be agreement between related countries when recommending heritage with possible disputes.
Experts say diplomacy and communication with the international community is needed so that Korea's voice on the mines is heard. The South Korean foreign minister will also discuss Korean peninsula affairs and regional issues at the Indo-Pacific ministerial meeting. The agenda may also include current tensions in Ukraine. And the minister will have bilateral meetings with officials from several countries, including Sweden, Greece, Bulgaria. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
It appears the sky is the limit with regard to escalating delivery costs here in the country. We have more on the causes behind this phenomenon and its consequences in this report. Do take a look.
This is Kang Dong-hun, a frequent user of delivery apps to order food. But the recent hike in delivery charges has made him rethink his meal purchases.
일단은 예전에는 배달이 무료인 경우가 많았어요. 어떤 조건 없이. 근데 요즘은 좀 조건이 있는 것 같아요. 5만 원 이상 주문해야 무료고 아니면 2,500원, 3,000원씩 들어가니까 좀 부담됩니다.
Rising delivery charges have become a concern for not only customers, but restaurant owners as well. So what's adding to the cost of delivery in the first place? Winding back to around a decade ago, most delivery orders were placed directly by phone, by the customer calling the restaurant. However, the emergence of delivery apps and delivery firms have added a new middleman in the delivery chain. Delivery charges are shouldered by both customers and restaurant owners, which are then distributed to cover the costs of delivery drivers and various fees. However, a recent hike in transaction fees by delivery firms in Korea has raised the average cost of food delivery in the Seoul area from an average of roughly $3 to more than $5.
배달 기사님들이 4건, 5건 하던 걸 거의 한 건으로 수익을 낼 수 있게 해야 되니까 배달료가 자연스럽게 오르게 된 겁니다. 그다음에 두 번째는 수요와 공급의 법칙 때문에 그래요. 이 코로나19 때문에 배달이 많이 늘어났습니다. 근데 배달 기사님들은 계속 늘어날 수가 없잖아요. 그러니까 배달 기사님이 모자라요. 그러니까 수요 공급 때문에 배달비는 오를 수밖에 없는 구조가 된 거죠.
Delivery platforms here in Korea are in fierce competition to secure the services of delivery drivers amid the current shortage of workers. However, for the delivery drivers themselves, the rise in delivery charges hasn't necessarily led to extra cash going in their pockets.
배달료를 올리면 이게 다 또 배달 노동자한테 그대로 다 가냐라고 했을 때 중간에 이제 수수료를 또 많이 떼는데요. 도대체 이게 수수료는 얼마를 제외하고 뭐 어떻게 되는 건지에 대해서 얼마를 계약하고 뭐 이렇게 되는 건지에 대해서 사실은 정보가 투명하게 공개된 게 하나도 없습니다.
Out of all the players involved, delivery customers have been hardest hit by the recent hike in delivery charges. According to a recent survey of 2,000 delivery customers, more than half responded that current delivery costs were felt to be excessive. Restaurant owners are also reporting that higher delivery costs are impacting their businesses as well. Unless they decide to eat the additional cost, restaurant owners must decide to either raise the price on their menu items or add extra delivery charges, both of which could impact their sales.
건당 9,000원 정도는 저희가 이제 감수하고 있는 상황인데 이 부분이 결국은 이제 또 소비자한테 어느 정도 일정 금액을 부과시킬 수밖에 없는 현실이 지금 와 있는 거죠.
In response, the Korean government announced that it'll begin disclosing on a monthly basis the delivery costs charged by each delivery platform in a bid to introduce price competition in the market. However, market experts and those working in the industry say there is much more that needs to be done.
투명하게 다 좀 시장이 이제 공개되는 게 맞을 것 같고요. 그래서 배달료가 실제로 라이더에게 오는 배달료가 어떻게 책정이 돼서 수수료가 얼마가 떼지고 어떻게 전해지는 건지 이런 것들에 대해서 투명해질 필요가 있다는 게 기본적으로 있고요.
플랫폼 사업자들도 단순히 비용을 소비자에게만 전가시키는 것보다는 경영의 효율화라든가 다른 부분에서 좀 자구 노력이 있어야 된다. 무조건 작은 액수를 배달시키는 것이 우리 같이 더불어 사는 사람들의 사회에서 긍정적인가? 이런 것도 저는 고민해 봐야 된다고 생각이 돼요.
As with any other issue, addressing the challenges of rising delivery costs will require the consensus and a little soul-searching among every stakeholder involved.
Omicron infection numbers continue to climb on the local front, and for more on the domestic situation, I have Dr. Kim Sik-taek at Institute Pasteur Korea live on the line. Dr. Kim, it's good to see you again.
Good afternoon.
I also have Professor Shim Eun-ha at Sungchul University joining the session virtually as well, of course. Professor Shim, it's a pleasure to see you again.
Thanks for having me.
Dr. Kim, we'll start with you. Let's begin with a few words then on our current COVID-19 situation, Dr. Kim. As we have recorded a total of over 2 million cases on this Monday in a span of 2 years and a month since our first infection.
Well, I think current status is actually especially on the some severe COVID-19 cases. I think the number is actually following the total number of COVID-19 infection, and then this is just quite obvious. Just when we actually consider the incubation time period, incubation time is actually just the time between virus exposure and then the symptom onset, and then this incubation time it actually just varies depending on the people, and then it can be just 2 days or like 14 days. And even just developing the severe symptoms, it takes time. It's like at least just a week or so. So then we are actually just seeing the some kind of just effect of the some sort of just the Lunar New Year's traveling, and then and also potentially some secondary transmission event right now.
Right. And Professor Shim, you've been using mathematical modeling to derive weekly COVID-19 forecasts here in the country. What do your findings, Professor Shim, tell you about the future course of our outbreak here in the country?
Sure. The daily infections have nearly doubled in just a week after surpassing 50,000 for the first time on February 10th. And this shows how fast the Omicron variant is spreading in the country. So we analyzed the data, and it shows that the reproduction number is estimated at 1.3 now, and doubling time is about 6 to 7 days, which is shorter than the 9 days estimate last week. It means that the COVID-19 cases are still on the rise, and we expect that by the end of this month, we project that the daily confirmed COVID cases would reach 175,000 and possibly up to 200,000, depending on human behavior and our adherence to the social distancing measures. And we also found that 51% of current transmission in Korea is contributed by asymptomatic patients, which makes it harder to track down. So these kind of results are not too positive, I'm afraid, but I hope that this mathematical modeling predictions will help us to plan ahead.
Right. Professor Shim, there's been a bit of discrepancy with regard to the daily tally forecast, with some predicting that more than 270,000 daily infections will be seen in the month of March. How do you explain the discrepancy?
Sure. Well, modeling assumptions and modeling techniques will change our output. And I have to caution that there's a large amount of uncertainty about Omicron that could significantly alter our projections. But basically, in our model, we try to incorporate reporting delays of confirmed cases because there's a time difference between when an infection occurs and when it's reported. And when the COVID-19 cases are on the rise, the actual number of cases is likely to be much higher than the number of confirmed cases. So for a more accurate estimation of a pandemic growth rate, we analyzed an epidemic curve according to the date of symptom onset rather than the date of reporting. And this can improve our results. And of course, those underlying assumptions for mathematical model can affect the predictions and making some differences between modeling outputs as well.
Right, I see. Meanwhile, Dr. Kim, I believe we touched upon this particular issue during our session on Friday, but there are still continuing conflicting views with regard to the government's decision to extend by 1 hour the operation hours of dining and drinking establishments. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, actually, just before deciding the government's decision on this 1 hour extension, well, just before that, I actually expected probably just the government would just maintain the previous just weeks, just the social distancing, just the measures. So that there's actually no change for just for upcoming just a couple of weeks. But then they change it. I think just 1 hour just extension. I think this is kind of just some minimum just a change that the government would just take. And then obviously this is kind of a compromise in between just the two different just arguments. One is the from the expert's view is some extreme measure is probably just a social lockdown, but the other on the other hand is the other just the current measures. But somehow just the government's just role is just a compromise two different just the views and then just make a decision. But whatever the outcome is, I think my personal thought is that maybe just maintain the previous just week's just decision, and because now just we are in the situation on the some escalating just the numbers are escalating in terms of a total number of COVID-19 cases and also just following the severe COVID-19 cases. But then we will see, I mean, in the near future what this decision would just how this decision would just affect.
Right. Now, Professor Shim, in an interview with the local media last week, you claimed our current COVID-19 situation is the most precarious. Now, that being the case then, what are your thoughts on the 1 hour extension in business operation hours, that is, for dining and drinking establishments?
Well, it is the first time that the daily cases surpassed 100,000 in the country. And we have to keep in mind that the nation is facing its most critical juncture since the onset of the pandemic. So I am concerned that now might not be the best time to ease social distancing measures. But I agree with other researchers that we should wait until we reach a point where we can say, well, outbreak has peaked and is in decline before we carefully start easing social distancing measures just like other nations.
Right. Dr. Kim, COVID-19 patients in their 40s with underlying health conditions are now eligible for Paxlovid. Do you believe the age limit needs to be further lowered?
Well, it's hard to tell. Actually, just this drug is also just eligible for just more the younger people. But then the key point is that whether we have the enough supply for the Paxlovid for all these COVID-19 patients, but the situation is not. So there is some government is try to just set some priority. Well, who will actually get the Paxlovid as a priority group? And then I think there are some certain criteria who will get the Paxlovid, and one of some negative sign is that if there's some underlying just a medical condition, if they are just a COVID-19 patient, they cannot take it. So then there's maybe some suggestion, but this has to be actually consulted with the physician. But because the Paxlovid is only taken just 5 days, so that if some drugs are not really essential for certain people, but those people are with some underlying medical condition or some elderly people, maybe they could just hold just some their regular just medication just for a while, and then take the Paxlovid, and then after that resume the their original just medication. But that has to be actually consulted with the physician. And then I think the physical, I mean the practical way of the practical way of just replacing this the Paxlovid is actually using the other just medication. For example, now we have the remdesivir, which can be actually very effectively used for the mild COVID-19 patient, and then the efficacy is quite just comparable to the Paxlovid. And but only just the disadvantage of this remdesivir at this moment is this is injection drug, but those patients actually have to visit the hospital the 3 days. So I think personally, I think this remdesivir may be just appropriate for just people in the some nursing hospitals and then nursing homes, because they are already now just living in the some confined some space, and then they can get some medical attention without just visiting hospitals. And then if the remdesivir is just some enough supply, this could be some alternative just medication in addition to the Paxlovid.
Right. And Dr. Kim, staying with treatment efforts, where does Korea stand in its efforts to develop an oral drug to treat COVID-19?
Well, as far as I know, I haven't heard any just the big just update regarding any oral drug development in Korea. But some globally there is some update just recently. And then, well, when after the Omicron variant just appears, now just many just monoclonal antibody actually did not have any just effect. For example, including the monoclonal antibodies from Regeneron and then Eli Lilly, and then even just a Korean the Celltrion one actually did not show any good just neutralizing activity against the Omicron variant, except only the sotrovimab. This was actually developed by the GSK and the Vir Biotechnology. That was the only that was actually the only just the monoclonal antibody that was actually effective against the Omicron variant. But just recently, the Eli Lilly and the Epsilon actually developed, and then now the new just a monoclonal antibody was actually approved for emergency use by just U.S. FDA. So now we have just additional just a weapon for against the just Omicron variant. So in summary, we summarized the some different different lines of just drugs for against the Omicron right now. Just the first line of the defense is the Paxlovid, as we are all aware. And then, but as we just discussed, the Paxlovid cannot be used for all the COVID-19 patients. If there are some, especially some kidney problems, those people with kidney problems cannot take the Paxlovid. And then especially in the U.S., so the second line of the therapeutic option is that actually the sotrovimab that I actually just mentioned, and also some new monoclonal antibody developed by the Eli Lilly and the Epsilon. And the third line of just the therapeutic option is, as I told you, just a remdesivir. And then this is the efficacy is quite just remarkable. It's comparable to the Paxlovid. It's 87%, which is actually just preventing just progressing to the severe COVID-19. And then lastly, just a molnupiravir. Although the efficacy is just a little bit just disappointing, because it's just 30% of just the clinical efficacy preventing the progression to severe disease. But then this drug does not have any just drug-drug interaction or any other just restriction in terms of just the use of this drug.
Right, I see. Meanwhile, back on the Omicron front, Professor Shim, what is your forecast on the timeline and scale of the peak of Omicron here in Korea?
Well, we can examine how the pandemic progressed in other countries previously. And in the US, for example, it took 3 weeks for the Omicron variant to become dominant strain in that country, and another 3 weeks to reach its apex. And similarly, in the UK, it took 3 weeks until the Omicron variant became the dominant strain, and another 3.5 weeks to reach its apex. Such a similar pattern was repeated in Japan with the 4 weeks interval instead. And we think that if the pattern repeats itself, the Omicron spread is likely to peak in mid-March in Korea, because it became dominant strain about a month ago. And it took 7 weeks for the variant to become dominant in this country. So based on this pattern and mathematical modeling, we estimate that a surge of Omicron infections in Korea will likely peak at 270,000 daily infections in mid-March. And also, it's likely that a week later, we will see a peak in hospitalization, and about 2 weeks later, we will see a peak in number of deaths. That's our predictions based on modeling.
Right, so we could perhaps see an improvement in our situation in April then?
Right.
Right. Dr. Kim, COVID-19 patients will be able to cast their ballots for the March 9th presidential election from 6 to 7:30 in the evening after regular voting. What safety measures do you recommend?
Well, I think it's just 1.5 hours, just a voting hour is, I think so just enough. I mean, when you actually consider the number of just the COVID-19 patients out of just the total just South Korean just population. But then the key issue is that it's actually just protecting the uninfected people from this infected COVID-19 just as a patient. And I think just segregating just these infected just people from the some potential uninfected people is actually a good way after the 6 o'clock. But then the question is how we can just protect the uninfected people from these the infected people. Mostly just uninfected people in this case indicate the people who actually just supervise the whole just the voting process, and also the some help the cast the ballot in the some local, I mean just community centers. And I think there's going to be some physical just separation out of just this infected person from the non-uninfected people. This we can actually think about some travel bubble, things like that, but I don't know exactly how the government will just implement this procedure in the due to presidential election day for now. Yeah.
Right, but hopefully safety will be the priority on that particular day as well. Professor Shim, you've mentioned that the human factor could be a major variable in the course of our Omicron outbreak. What other variables are they that could potentially affect the path of our pandemic here?
I think there could be two major factors that may affect the spread of virus in near future. Well, first, new semester will begin in March and schools will reopen. And this is going to change completely the contact patterns in the country. And it's likely that we will see some rise in contact rate among children, especially, and students. And on top of it, the vaccine coverage levels among students are pretty low. And it's actually that 12% of those aged 12 to 19 received the booster doses, and only 71% received the second dose. Plus, based on the report last week, the infection rate among teenagers, that was twice higher than that in adults aged 50 plus. So I'm concerned that a school-based cluster of infection might occur once a new semester starts. So that's my concern. And second, we have to think about stealth Omicron, the subvariant BA2, because it's now accounting for more than 20% of new coronavirus infection globally. So those two factors can significantly affect the infection curve of COVID-19 in Korea, I believe.
Right. Professor Shim, personally speaking, given the concerns that you've been raised, do you suppose the academic arena, including universities perhaps, should opt to have online classes then for the spring?
Yes, I think it would be helpful to have online courses. So it's going to help to reduce the first of all infection among students, because that can also lead to transmission to family members in the household.
Right. Dr. Kim, Professor Shim mentioned how the vaccination rates among the teenagers is relatively low compared to that of adults. And having said that, what can you tell us about efforts to perhaps come up with a homegrown vaccine here on the local front?
Well, there are several research institutions and then companies actually developing our Korean just homegrown just vaccines. I think the SK Bioscience is one of the frontiers to develop the Korean vaccine, and then some other the companies also just developing Korean just vaccines. And Well, but I think whether I'm not quite sure whether these homegrown vaccines can be actually widely used in the near future, because now we have actually used many just the vaccines so far. So mostly just mRNA-based vaccines and then adenovirus vector vaccine. And just recently we started another protein subunit-based vaccine like from the Novavax. So I think just most of the vaccines will be actually conducted with the vaccines that we are actually using right now. But just in terms of preparing for some future the pandemic, especially like some coronavirus-related pandemic, this developing these homegrown vaccines are still just a very effective, very a good approach that we actually have to pursue.
Right. Professor Shim, going back to your modelling, mathematical modelling that is, you spoke about how the number of patients in critical conditions will surge a week after Omicron's peak in mid-March here in Korea. How high are those numbers looking to rise?
We don't have a specific numbers at hand. It's too far in advance. So I'd rather stick with the number of potential infections, and based on it, we can see how fast it will. The number of patients in hospitals will rise accordingly.
Right, and the highest number that you expect this daily tally to surge is 270,000 cases per day, right?
Correct.
Does it look to surpass that number? Are there any factors that could perhaps push the number higher to perhaps 300,000 cases per day?
Well, there are a lot of potential factors, such as the school reopening, as I mentioned, and also people are tired of social distancing measures at the moment. So that can also affect the potential curve of a pandemic in the near future.
Right, as they fail to perhaps abide by prevention efforts. Dr. Kim, you've frequently spoken about the human factor that Professor Shim mentioned and how about it playing a very pivotal part in the course of the pandemic here in the country. Could you tell us a bit more about your thoughts on that, and also on perhaps ways to tackle that reality, the human factor?
Well, just regarding the current Omicron surge, there are some things that we cannot change anymore, but still just others that we can change. For the things that we cannot change is that the virus is fixed. And now just the major variant is Omicron that we cannot change at the moment. Although there is a little bit of some surge of the Omicron some sub-variant, like some stealth Omicron, things like that. And then there are some things like some human the immune status that we actually acquired, whether it is just vaccination or just natural infection. But the one thing that I can add is that actually just vaccination for teenagers, and that actually we can actually increase by just some campaign, and then just increasing the vaccination among the teenagers. Since now we have the vaccines from the Novavax, that might maybe promising. And in terms of our the behavior, well, I think we have to actually expect our very responsible behavior. I mean, there's no need that everybody just get infected by the Omicron variant. So they are very responsible, and the voluntary behavior is very important. And also just a booster shot. I mean, although the third booster shot is the third shot is probably enough for now. And then still there are some people who did not get the booster shot. So getting a booster shot is something that you can actually achieve in the very near future.
Right. Proactive efforts on the vaccination front then. Dr. Kim, as always, thank you very much for your thoughts. Professor Shim, thank you very much for being with us here with your insights.
Thank you.
Right. The current consensus with regard to COVID-19 here in the country is that the daily tally will continue to climb, so do seek to take precautions. Thank you for watching. See you on Tuesday.